Hello, welcome to Secure Talk, your trusted source of information on the latest threats, trends, tools, and technology related to cybersecurity and compliance. Join our hosts as they discuss a wide range of topics and speak with leading cybersecurity, technology, and compliance experts. Now is the time for Secure Talk.
Hello everybody, welcome to Secure Talk. Secure Talk is brought to you by AdeQuest, your cybersecurity and compliance partner. Today I'm here with AdeQuest CEO, Hiram Machado. Hiram, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic, Mark. What about you?
Great. It was a very, very busy week.
Wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, in fact, what was your take on this week? What was the most exciting thing for you?
Really get in front of a lot of people to talk about security and GDPR, right? We ended up having a good ride this week, meeting all of the Microsoft sales team and talking with them about GDPR. Meeting at the ISSA meeting last night was a pretty interesting one with
That's right. I think we had like 40, 50 people there, and you did a great presentation about GDPR. But today, we're not here to talk about GDPR. We're actually going to talk a little bit about the importance of IT security, cybersecurity, when you're in the middle of an acquisition, both for the pre-merger or pre-acquisition due diligence, and then the post-acquisition integration as well. But before we dig into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about AdeQuest's experience with venture integration or post-acquisition IT integration?
Thank you very much. Yes, it's a very interesting niche, if you will, right? We have a few customers in that arena, Microsoft being one of them. And what we do is help these organizations with integration of their IT infrastructure once they have acquired a company. A lot of people don't realize, the importance of having the understanding of what are the steps, what to do first, what to do next when it comes to integration. IT professionals, they are usually very solid. They know IT, that's very good, but not always they understand the process of IT. So that's what we bring to the table, right? We understand what it takes. We have best practice written to really make that process as smooth as possible.
So let me just ask you this. How long have you been doing the post-acquisition IT integration for Microsoft?
For about 8 years at least.
Okay.
Have been that.
And can you give me an idea roughly like how many, on average, acquisitions per year you're doing?
Between all of our clients, we are doing anywhere between 15 to 30 acquisitions every year.
And I'm assuming across a variety of sizes?
All kind of sizes. Small, big, from very small 2-3 people organizations all the way to, thousands of people in some cases.
That's interesting. So let me ask you. You said that having a process is really important for this. Did you and AdeQuest adopt an industry standard process, or did you develop your own process?
Right. Yeah, there are some industry standards, but well-known books written in the arena. But we basically wrote our own playbook, right? So we have a playbook that helps you navigate through the process and makes it more pragmatic, right, and more consistent approach to ensure success throughout, right?
Okay.
The integration. A lot of companies are buying one after other, right? They're in the mode of acquisition, and having consistency will definitely help them realize, right, the ROI of that acquisition much faster. That's all what it is about, right? Mm-hmm. It's all about realizing the ROI or the value of that acquisition. Usually you can realize the quicker that you can integrate that organization into your own organization, the quicker you're going to realize. Also, you mitigate risks by doing a quick integration, employees leaving or losing talent. So you want to maximize that process in terms of efficiencies to get all of those benefits right away.
Okay, so I think we've established that AdeQuest has a lot of experience with this post-merger or post-acquisition IT integration. And again, you're doing these all around the world, right? I mean, it's not just here in the Northwest. It's I mean, I know we have people flying off to Israel and all other locations.
All over the world, yeah. Our clients are a lot of them. Most of them are U.S.-based clients, right?
Okay.
But the acquisitions that they're making are happening worldwide.
Okay.
So yes, our team does travel whatever the acquisition take place and support.
Can you name some of the bigger or more higher profile acquisitions that you've worked on?
Yeah, I think I usually like to go a little bit back in years because we don't like to talk too much about the more recent ones.
Right, sensitive information, right?
Right, there are sensitive information. But yeah, we have worked with Microsoft on Skype integration, Yammer integration,
Wow.
Nokia integration.
Okay, those are some pretty high profile acquisitions, and I'm sure the projects themselves were very interesting to work on. So we have the credibility, or we've established your credibility in that space. Now let's take a step back. And, let's look at a company that is in the acquisition process. They're out there, they're looking for, a target. Maybe they've identified a target and they want to do, some due diligence. And a lot of times due diligence relates to looking at their existing client base, their revenue streams, looking at the financials, basically, right? But another important part that sometimes is overlooked is doing your due diligence around the target company's IT platform.
Right.
Yeah. Now, why is that important?
Right. Well, there is a number of things that comes with it, right? There is number one, IT is more often than not critical to the most business nowadays, right?
Absolutely.
So you want to make sure that you are buying, you're getting what you are buying, right? So the IT deals with lots of contracts when it comes to software licensing, for example. And you want to make sure that you are, the company that you are acquiring are compliant with the right, licensing
Absolutely.
structure that they have in place. To be honest with you, it's amazing how many companies are out of compliance in that sense. Almost every time that we go to an acquisition, we find companies out of compliance. And it's not because they want to, or even there was intention to be out of compliance. Because managing software assets is not an easy task in a typical organization. Right? There is a lot of shadow IT. There is a lot of individuals are downloading apps and connecting apps to their systems, and you want to make sure that those apps are secure. You want to be. In fact, there was a customer that we must go unnamed here. That because of an acquisition and not having the proper controls in place during the integration, they were a victim of a cyber attack through the acquired company.
Okay.
Right?
Wow. So there's a couple issues here. One is you're saying you want to understand what your risk is, or what if you're buying a company. If they're out of compliance with their licenses, that's a liability that you're taking on.
Right.
If they haven't properly set up their IT cyber defense or their security controls, maybe some said they're using older out of service operating systems, or they don't have a good patch policy, and you take that on, you're also maybe at risk for some type of cyber attack or a malware attack, right?
Correct. Yes. Okay. And because of that experience, we are now helping them to establish a process and have a pragmatic and total approach to integration when it comes to
So you're looking at the pre-acquisition due diligence. What kind of services, what would you, if I was looking at a target and you said, hey, we need to check about license compliance, we need to talk about just to check about the IT security and how secure it is. What kind of services would you provide for that? How would you do that?
Right, yeah. Well, number one thing is we can do a network scanning, right?
Okay.
So, and we advise every organization acquiring a company to make that part of their process. Network scanning will allow you to, for example, validate. Usually, you're going to get a lot of information from them, like in verbally, right? They're going to tell you we have X number of computers, X number of users in our systems, right? As X number of software licenses, X number of servers, right, and etc. Well, how do you validate all of that? In a company with 1,000+ servers, right?
Right.
With 1,000+ workstations. How do we validate that? The network scanning is probably the best way to go about it, right? Quickly, in a matter of a couple of days, you can run a network scan. You find out how many workstations are there connected to the system. You can extrapolate from that network scanning a list of applications being used in all of different laptops. Now you get an inventory, of what you have, and you can hopefully, validate that inventory with what they're telling you. I'll tell you, most of the time, there is a gap between what you find through the automated scanning versus what people are telling you. Again, they're not lying to you. They're telling you what they believe it is, but they might not know.
Well, what else can you find from these network scans? I mean, in addition to the physical devices and hardware and maybe different VMs that they have set up, what else can you see?
Well, a lot of good things that we can come out of it. Number one is you get really the list of users by country, right? And you identify where they are, which countries they are, whether the OSs, the applications are current with the patches on each one of the machines that you are acquiring, which you might want to force an update of those machines before you integrate them together. You can find information about the user practices around password reset, right? And we have been to organizations that, in all honest, many of the users did not have their password reset for 10 years.
Wow. That would raise a flag, right?
That would raise a flag,
if they haven't changed their password for 10 years, or you have an inactive account that's actually still, how would you say this? It's an account that's has been set up, but the person's left the company. You've seen these kind of things.
We have seen that, absolutely.
And so that's a potential risk right there, right? You want to get in there and clean that stuff up as soon as possible. And maybe it's a signal that the system has already been compromised, and you might have somebody camping out in there and monitoring traffic and doing some bad stuff. So, because it's bad security hygiene, basically.
Absolutely.
And that would raise a flag.
Yeah, a great example is one of the customers that came to us and said they had about 3,500 users. When you ran the scan, there were over 5,000 active accounts.
Wow.
In the system, right? Wow. And in their mind, there were 3,500 users, but we found over 5,000 active accounts.
Percentage-wise, that's just a huge difference.
Right? So when it comes to integration, number one, let's clean that up. Let's make sure that we have only right? The right accounts that you want to migrate into your organization before you do it, for example.
Okay. So now, so we've talked about the pre-acquisition due diligence. Now walk us through some best practices for the post-acquisition integration. What are some of the key points that you that you want to make sure you go through?
Right, yeah. The post-acquisition is, that network scanning could happen either prior or post-acquisition, right?
Okay.
So if you have done the network scanning prior to the close, you now have enough data to carry on your post work. If not, that's probably what you want to do first. Do that network scanning. Once you have that data, you want to look into, for example, application list and map out the applications of the acquired organization with the applications of the current organization. And have a plan for each one of those applications, right? So you have now a plan per application. What are you going to do? Are you going to retire the data associated with that application? Are you going to just ignore it and wipe it out? Are you going to migrate into a new system? Is it the same system? Is the company that you acquired, for example, on QuickBooks and your company is on SAP, right? Now there's a business decision to be made here. What do we do with the data that we have on QuickBooks? Do we need to migrate that into SAP? Do you just host it for a little while we are required to maintain that data and delete it afterwards? Some of it is a business discussion, right? Not technical discussion. So, but first you have to come up with that list and that mapping.
You bring up a lot of interesting points, and we're going to jump kind of off the security track for a second and go more to the business decision. We were having a conversation before about the network scan. It not only can help you understand potential security risks, it can also point out opportunities to optimize, right?
Right, absolutely.
Can you give some examples about that?
Yes, and so that's the one thing, right? We're talking about just the application list. The other thing, chances are you have servers and databases and all of that. Now, if a organization has an on-premise environment and you want to migrate that to the cloud, for example, right? One way to do it is to do a one-to-one relationship. Okay, you have X number of servers and VMs on-premise. Let's replicate that, right, on the cloud. Chances are that you don't need that one-on-one relationship, and that's going to be very expensive. Right? So
because?
Because often, when you have on-premise environment, you don't have the flexibility of the cloud. You cannot scale up and down as needed as in the cloud.
So you buy a server and it's fully utilized 1 day a week. The other 6 days it's sitting there at 50% capacity. You've just paid for extra capacity and you're not using it.
Exactly, but you have to match the server configuration to that highest level of utilization that you might have 1 day of a week. Right. On the cloud, it's a little bit different. Things are more dynamic. So what you want to do through the network scanning is to analyze the traffic through your server configuration, reads and writes of your databases, right, and maximize, right, or optimize the VM and configuration that you're going to have on the cloud and reduce the cost. An example that I can give you of one recent customer that we did is if we were to map that environment that they had on-premise to Azure cloud, right? If you were to migrate them to the cloud as it is, they would have to pay about $45,000 a month, right, for that environment. So after optimization, that came down to $11,000 a month.
That's a huge savings. That's pretty cool.
Right?
Yeah.
And that is without compromising, performance.
Right.
That is just by understanding the environment, understanding how much traffic there is, and saying with this configuration you will get the same level of performance, but yet for a much less price.
And this just comes from running a simple network scan.
Running a simple network scanning, let it run for a couple of weeks, get enough traffic information, right? Average out, and that will allow us to do the analysis of what is the optimal configuration for your own.
Sounds like a good investment of time and resources to get that information. Let me jump back to the security track again here for a second. Post acquisition, give me your thoughts on actually this could be pre-acquisition as well, but give me your thoughts on shadow IT, because for me, I'd want to know what's out there, but even in my own organization, oftentimes we hear about companies that they will do a shadow IT assessment and they find out that they have hundreds or sometimes even thousands of apps that they weren't aware of. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. That was an example of one customer that came to us and they found out that, and by the way, they have almost 100,000 employees, but to be fair, but once they did some analysis on how many applications, right, were accessing their data, right, they found out there were over 1,000 applications that they had no idea that were accessing their data. And that is because employees today, with the concept of BYOD, your own device, and if you have a CRM system, for instance, right, on your organization, there are hundreds of small applications out there that employees can download, enter their username and password, and connect to your server. And now that application is downloading data. The problem is, you as an IT organization may not know how secure that application is.
Right.
In fact, a lot of these applications are not secure, right? And they are holes. They have holes that might allow either they leak data. And some of them are even malicious, to be honest with you, right? Some of them are intentionally collecting data. The general user population are not aware of it. They just find it cool, find that it's easy to use, and they are now putting your whole infrastructure at risk, not knowing it, right? So you want to have control over that. You want an inventory of which applications are accessing data, and you want to make sure that you, as an IT organization, provision each one of those applications to the employees, and not let the employees just pick applications at random.
Sounds like some good advice there. And earlier you mentioned that this week you did a couple presentations related to GDPR, and I'm wondering about your thoughts on, if you're acquiring a company, wouldn't you want to know what kind of data they have? And talk a little bit about the importance of identifying the data, storing data, getting rid of data that's not needed.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, compliance and compliance to data privacy is becoming more and more important, right? We don't stop hearing about, big, high-profile, incidents.
If you look at and by the way, obviously GDPR relates to data that ties to EU residents. But and a lot of American companies are like, well, that doesn't affect us. Well, we can get to that another time. Right. But if we look at what's happened to Facebook recently and all the scrutiny that they're under right now, yeah. And we kind of feel this is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, it's going to happen more and more, right?
And
yeah.
Uber is another recent
example,
right? And Uber failed to report that data had been leaked for over a year.
I mean, that's just
right. That's just not acceptable, right?
But anyway, back to the identifying the data in your acquisition target. What would you what are your thoughts around that? Why is that important?
Yeah, well, it's important because number one, you want to make sure that what you're inheriting, whether you have sensitive data throughout the network. Most organizations, if we ask them where are the sensitive data that you have, chances are they're going to tell you, I'm not sure. Right? And chances are they're going to tell you, well, we know most of it is here, but is there any sensitive data elsewhere? They might not know because, again, the people are just using the data as they please. They are creating a Word document and putting on a share somewhere, right? And out of the sudden, that Word document has personal identifiable information that you may not be aware that it's there. So there is a process that we usually go through prior to migration, which is data discovery. So we want to do another analysis, right? A little bit different from the network analysis that I mentioned before, which is focused on the infrastructure itself, right? Okay. And this one now is focused on the actual data that you are storing throughout your network, and I mean both structured and unstructured data. So you want to look through that, identify inside each one of those locations where you might have data, where you have PII data, and then you can apply classification to those, right? You classify them. It's like putting a tag on which files and which database you have personal identifiable information. Once you put a flag on, now you can think about what are the rules and how do I want to control that data, who should have access, who should not have access to that data, and you apply the rules before you do the migration. So now when you're migrating, you know that you're putting things on the right place with the right security in place, with the right controls in place.
Yeah, and it's interesting that I think that most people listening and most people that we present to, we all agree that when it comes to GDPR and some of the other privacy regulations that are emerging, we ask them, do emails fall under this? And most people say yes, of course. How about HR databases? Oh, of course. How about customer information client lists? Yes, of course. But then you start asking things like, what about CCTV scans? Or what about images? And people are like, oh, I'm really not sure. But actually, as we know, even that data, if it ties to an EU resident, is considered PII and would fall under GDPR, right? So when you talk about organizations not knowing where their data is, sometimes they don't even know what data is important and what data that falls under this. So it's really important to kind of figure out what you're inheriting and what you have, right?
Yeah, and it's important to highlight, we are talking about EU residents. It does not necessarily mean that company must be have a presence in the EU.
Absolutely.
As long as you have the EU resident data, you should be concerned about how you handle sensitive information.
Well, you've given us a lot of good information. I mean, in terms of best practices, things to look out for if you're in the process of acquiring a company, if you want to do some due diligence, or you're going to merge that company into your organization after the acquisition. Any parting thoughts? Any other best practices, thoughts, guidance that you'd like to share with the listeners?
Yeah, I think what we have seen in terms of companies that are acquiring is do not underestimate the importance of pay attention to your integration process. We have seen a lot of times organizations, they have very strong IT departments, right, with very strong knowledge, and but if they haven't experienced an integration process, chances are that they will struggle and might need help. So my advice is, do not underestimate the effort of putting two organizations together, and look for expert advice. If you're doing it for the first time or the first few times, because you're going to be better off with the right advice in place.
I think that's some excellent parting advice here from Hiram Machado, CEO of Adequest. Hiram, thank you again for joining Secure Talk.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you everybody for listening. Hope you have a great week ahead. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Hello, welcome to Secure Talk, your trusted source of information on the latest threats, trends, tools, and technology related to cybersecurity and compliance. Join our hosts as they discuss a wide range of topics and speak with leading cybersecurity, technology, and compliance experts. Now is the time for Secure Talk.